So Gene Robinson, yes. We
Robinson's
do
here.
love
Elise Jordan
going after pollsters.
Yes, we do.
Especially when we're so shocked. But, you know, James Carville was on the show about a month ago, and he said, listen, this race is not going to be one like 4 swing states to 3 swing states.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to all,
exactly.
It all
flips
it's going to all
one
go
way or
one
the
way.
other.
One's going to win 7, the other's going to lose 7.
Yeah.
And he goes, and it's going to be by the narrowest of margins. Well, if you look at the polls, you look at what James said, look what we were saying here, that this race is a tie. That's exactly what happened. And
That's what happened.
That push went to Donald Trump at the end by a percentage point, 1.5 percentage point in 3 states that made all the difference.
No, that's exactly what happened. Now, I happen to think it was going to happen the other way.
Right.
I thought that it was tipping toward Harris, and I would not have been surprised had she swept the swing states. But clearly that was wrong. It was the kind of night for which hotel minibars were made. But look, it's, you know, it's difficult for a lot of us to understand how Donald Trump, given his record, given his incumbency, given everything he says and does, is trusted and liked enough by enough Americans to make him president again. But there we have it. I mean, and as you said, the polls had it a tie race. It's going to come out a point or 2, but you know, not in the direction that I expected it to come.
So, Elise, we've been talking all morning that Donald Trump made gains almost everywhere over his margins in 2020, likely going to sweep the battleground states. What's your morning after assessment of how he did it?
You've got to hand it to the Trump campaign. They really ran a hell of a campaign, running up margins where they didn't previously. You know, at the end of the day, the economy, inflation, it affects everyone's lives. You're paying double for food. Biden is unpopular, and she didn't separate from Joe Biden early enough, and she did it tepidly when the time came. And while that's honorable as a personal trait, she had to be more ruthless at the end of the day in separating because Biden is unpopular. I also think that there is just a cultural element of voting for Trump at this point, of voting against the condescending elites, that supersedes everything. And it is, you know, seen as them against us. He's our guy. Look at how they tried to get him. Look at how he always wins and he fights back. And he built a redemption narrative. And now...
And by the way, Elise, you and I'm so glad you talked to that. We grew up with that in Mississippi. I lived in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Northwest Florida. It was like the elites were always against us. It was Hollywood always made fun of us. The news media was always biased. The things that our kids saw on TV always outside the mainstream. You know, the counterculture always embraced by the elites who just didn't understand how we lived in the flyover states. That was the narrative for our entire lives that we heard. And I think you're exactly right. You do a whole lot of talking about a whole lot of things. But at the end, that narrative, which people have grown up with for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, it sticks.
And that's why the anti-trans ads were so powerful, frankly, because it's not necessarily even about the trans issues. It is about schools and the issue of schools. And you look at, remember that Virginia governor's race where when Glenn Youngkin upset it, and it wasn't about book bans as much as it was just people wanted to get their kids back in school. And when I think a national platform goes so local and hits into local issues that are hot buttons, you see how Trump is successful. But
Willie, we need to talk about the trans ad that Donald Trump ran 30,000 times. I think he spent $30 million on it, according to NPR. And they, you know, Jack and I are watching football on YouTube TV, and you can see 4 screens. That ad's popping up all fall. Yeah. And so it's like, you know, I'm asking people, you guys see what's going on here, right? It's nothing. Nah, that's nothing. It's not showing up. It's not showing up. Well, why did the Trump people do it 30,000 times? Because, guys, in rural America, guys across the Midwest, guys, younger guys who are Hispanic, younger guys who are black guys, they're all looking at that going, okay, man, she's weird. And as Bill Maher said, it's like, she's like really too liberal. And Bill Maher said, you know, that ad out there is basically saying there's nothing that the left will not say no to. Of course, we know the end of the story. Rick Wilson came on, and it ends up that was Donald Trump's policy. That was his Justice Department policy.
But nobody saw that ad.
Nobody saw that ad because Rick Wilson tried to get that ad played, and all of the PAC groups, all the different, oh, no, that ad's not having an impact. I'm telling you, that ad had a bigger impact than any ad that ran, and that's why they ran it 30,000 times. Guys were watching it over and over again going, whew. Well, I think you told me a member of your family was like, whoa, that's weird.
And the power was that it was in her own words. They couldn't run from that. She was on camera saying that, despite the fact, as we pointed out many times, that this was a Trump-era policy. But it got to a larger point, which was, I think a lot of voters didn't buy her swing to the middle. They believed she was who she said she was in 2019 when she ran for president, and when she was confronted with all that about the police and this stuff about trans surgeries in prisons and all that. I think a lot of people thought that's her. She swung to the center to win a general election, but we're not buying it. And I will tell you, I live in a relatively rural area outside the city. There was a local race there, and the Republican changed her signs, picking up on this, and every sign said "Save Girls Sports." It was just her name for a long time. And she said, if you read and talk to people around the campaign, she couldn't print enough of those signs. People were driving by saying, I want one of those for my yard. When it was just her name, they said, oh, it's another candidate. I don't even know who she is or what she's running for. Save Girls Sports. And they were all over the place.
Well, Matt, the Washington Post, Matt Bai, writes in part, I do think the prosecutions fed a narrative of Trump as a victim. I also think Democrats dug themselves into a hole on cultural issues and identity politics. Trump's vicious transgender ad in the closing weeks, she's for they, them, he's for you, was probably the most effective of the cycle. I think that probably landed with a lot of traditionally Democratic voters who feel like the party is consumed with the cultural issues, while the economic issues don't really change. I think people needed a reason to feel good and hopeful about voting for her, and absent that, a lot of frustrated voters apparently decided to go with the guy who wants to burn it all down.
Let's dig a little deeper, because you have that stacked on top of what happened on college campuses this fall, stacked on top of what's been happening on college campuses over the past 4 or 5 years. I have said this on the air, and every time I've said it, people said, oh, you're just saying that because you're a white conservative. No, I'm just saying it because every Democrat that we have ever sat down with dinner with over the past 5 years who have kids that go to colleges say their kids are afraid to speak in class because they'll be canceled. Let me say that again. And they're all Democrats. Everybody that we've had dinner with, if they have a kid in college, you go, how the Red Sox going? Yeah, fine. Yeah. Sitting there eating. Beautiful day today, wasn't it? Yeah. You know, my daughter at University of Virginia, she's afraid to raise her hand in class because if she says something that's politically incorrect, she will immediately be canceled. She'll be shunned from class. She'll be destroyed in social media by noon. So they just sit in class quiet. Now, if any of you, which camera? Give me a camera to look at. Boom! Oh, look at that one. If any of you out there say, oh, that's just like a conservative, white, Southern guy, da-da-da, that's where you're losing. That's why you're losing. Because that's what I heard. And I didn't hear it from Republicans. I didn't hear it from Trumpers. I heard it from Democrats over the past 3 or 4 years. Their kids were afraid to talk in class and say something unpopular because they would be canceled. And it's an epidemic. Willie will tell you it happens in New York City schools. It happens in colleges. And all of this adds up to people going, come on, this is crazy. And, Mike, it's having an impact from, again, the trans ad to, the athletics. And by the way, as we've said on the show 1,000 times, Democrats should be smarter on the women's athletics thing. 85% of Americans oppose men transitioning after puberty and competing against women. And I'm not just saying this the day after the election. I've been saying this for years. This is not a hard call. You can show compassion and you can show grace. And as the Republican governor of Utah said, let's figure out a way to do this. But one way we don't do this is by allowing men who transition after puberty competing against young girls who have been working their entire lives to be as good as they can be, and then they get destroyed in the pool, on the track, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Let's take a couple. The husband's a firefighter. The wife is a nurse and an emergency room nurse. They have 3 kids. One is college age. The other 2 are in high school. The 2 kids who were in high school and the kid in college lost a lot of the school year in 2021 after COVID. They were kept home. Parents didn't know why.
In fact, he didn't get to play his senior year of football. Been playing it since 7th grade.
They missed proms, they missed friendships, they missed socialization, they missed so much. They missed it all in terms of high school, okay? So they've moved on in their lives. The Democratic Party doesn't realize what they don't hear, what they don't talk to. So these kids all went to schools where they came home and one of them got in trouble because he didn't use they or them or whatever pronoun was needed to be used in an 8th grade classroom. He got shunned because of it. The other kid came home one day and she was in trouble because of the same thing, because of language and because she complained about the guy who was playing on her school softball team and the girls' softball team, all right? So the parents are so frustrated they don't know what to do. And they have one particular party, the Democratic Party, and a small clique of the Democrats who call themselves progressive have spent the last decade hectoring those people. Tell them, no, you have to say they. No, you have to do this. You have to live this way. There are a lot of transgender people. We must respect them. No one wants to harm transgenders. But how many of them are there?
Yep.
Seriously.
So this is a significant part, but not all of what happened. I mean, we can't avoid what Donald Trump brought to the table and what Americans voted for. I mean, what he brought to the table was clear and present and vulgar and threatening, and he won.
And because of all of what you just said, Mika, a lot of people who formerly voted for the Democrat heard him, watched him, listened to him, and said, boy, he's tough enough to beat down those people.
Right.
Yeah.
He doesn't care what they do.
And by the way, people are listening, again, we're talking about a lot of different issues. We're not talking about the transgender issue. And as I said before, there's a compassionate way to do 2 things at once.
I totally agree. But
Same thing with like college. And if you had a 4th child there who was going to a school, a college, that basically got shut down by people burning American flags and trafficking anti-Semitism, that would be a grand slam on those political correct issues that I promise matters, and not just to white people. Look at the polls; it matters to people of color as well.